The text message vibrated my phone, a cold, sterile rectangle of words that sliced through the quiet hum of my Friday evening like a shard of ice. Nicholas is getting married. You are not invited. It was from Aunt Carol, always the reluctant messenger, and the bluntness of it twisted a knot in my stomach I thought had long since unraveled. Nicholas, my brother, the one I'd practically raised. Getting married? Without me? The irony was a bitter pill, considering the last time we spoke, it was about his desperate need for a wedding, and my steadfast refusal to enable what I saw as a catastrophic mistake. My name is Olivia, and I'm 35 now, but some wounds never truly heal. They just scar over, waiting for the right moment to ache again. Nicholas, 5 years my junior, had always been a whirlwind of impulsive decisions and charming recklessness. A trait that, in our younger years, I'd found endearing, then exasperating, and finally heartbreaking. Our parents died in a car accident when I was 20, leaving me, barely an adult myself, with a 15-year-old brother who was suddenly adrift. The world as I knew it shattered, and I was left to piece together not just my own fragments, but his too. It was a baptism by fire, a crash course in adulthood I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I remember the social worker, a kind but weary woman named Miss Jenkins, sitting across from me in our suddenly too quiet living room, explaining the legalities of guardianship. "It's a huge responsibility, Olivia," she'd said, her voice soft but firm. "He's still a minor. You'd be legally responsible for everything." I'd nodded, my head swimming with grief and a terrifying sense of inadequacy. How could I, a college sophomore with dreams of art school and a life unburdened, suddenly become a parent? But there was no one else. No grandparents, no aunts or uncles willing or able to step up. It was just Nicholas and me, two orphans clinging to each other in a house that echoed with absence. The weight of that responsibility, the sheer, crushing enormity of it, settled onto my young shoulders like a shroud. I was supposed to be planning my junior year abroad, sketching designs for my portfolio, dreaming of a future where I'd paint vibrant murals in sun-drenched studios. Instead, I was learning about probate court, budgeting for groceries, and trying to decipher the moody silences of a grieving teenager. Those first few years were a blur of grief, anger, and a constant low-level panic. Nicholas, in the throes of adolescence, compounded by trauma, became a different person. The sweet, goofy kid who used to follow me around like a shadow was replaced by a sullen, rebellious stranger. "You're not my mom," became his mantra, hurled at me during arguments over homework, curfews, or the simple act of asking him to clean his room. And he was right. I wasn't his mom. I was a sister, trying desperately to fill shoes that were several sizes too big, navigating my own sorrow while trying to be the rock he needed. I worked 2 part-time jobs, waitressing at a diner and shelving books at the local library, went to community college classes at night, and tried to keep our small 3-bedroom house in a quiet Ohio suburb from falling apart, both literally and figuratively. The house, once filled with laughter and the comforting scent of Mom's baking, now felt cavernous, haunted by memories. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow seemed to whisper of what we'd lost. There were nights I'd cry myself to sleep, my face buried in a pillow to muffle the sobs, overwhelmed by the weight of it all, fantasizing about running away, about shedding the burden. But then I'd look at Nicholas, asleep in his room, his face still boyish and vulnerable, and the fierce protective love I felt would always win out. He was all I had left, and I was all he had. He eventually mellowed, as teenagers often do, though the scars of our shared trauma lingered beneath the surface. By 17, the storm had passed, replaced by a calmer, albeit still somewhat detached, young man. He'd found solace in tinkering with old cars, spending hours in our neighbor's garage, learning the mechanics of engines. When he graduated high school, we had a serious talk about his future. I put my own dreams on hold for him, sacrificing my art school ambitions for the stability of a steady job and a practical degree. I wanted him to have every opportunity to pursue something he loved. He, however, was tired of school. "I just want to work, Liv," he'd said, his eyes earnest, grease smudged on his cheek. School's not for me right now. Maybe later, but for now, I need a break. I understood. We'd both been through enough. The idea of more academic pressure, more financial strain, felt unbearable. So he started working odd jobs, a mechanic's assistant, a delivery driver, saving up what he could, and we continued to live in our childhood home. It was a silent agreement, an unspoken pact that neither of us was ready to take on the financial burden of a mortgage or separate apartments. We were comfortable in our own way, a fragile peace built on shared history and unspoken sacrifices, a quiet understanding that our bond, though tested, was unbreakable. Life settled into a rhythm. I found a stable job as a graphic designer at a small, local firm, slowly building my portfolio and reputation. Nicholas, true to form, bounced between various entry-level positions, always optimistic, always convinced the next one would be the one that would launch his career. He talked about opening his own garage, about restoring classic cars, but the follow-through was often lacking. We dated, sometimes seriously, sometimes casually, but neither of us rushed into anything permanent. The idea of a mortgage, of combining finances, felt like a trap after witnessing the financial struggles our parents had faced and the immense pressure I'd felt trying to keep our heads above water. We were fiercely independent, perhaps to a fault, wary of anything that threatened our hard-won stability. Then Madison entered the picture. Nicholas was 20, she was 19, and she arrived like a glitter bomb, all sparkle and surface, with an underlying current of demanding energy. He brought her home one evening, his eyes alight with an intensity one hadn't seen since he was a kid unwrapping a new video game console. "Liv, this is Madison, my fiancée." My fork clattered against my plate, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. "Fiancée? After a few months?" My mind reeled. I wanted to pull him aside, to talk sense into him, to remind him of all the lessons we'd learned about financial prudence and careful planning, but the look on his face, that blinding, infatuated glow, told me it would be useless. He wouldn't hear a word I said. He was utterly, completely smitten, and in that moment, I saw a dangerous echo of his younger, more impulsive self. Madison was a lot. She worked as an administrator at some high-end salon downtown, but she was vague about the details, always deflecting questions about her job with a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand. Her Instagram was a curated feed of designer bags, expensive brunches, and perfectly posed selfies, each post meticulously crafted to project an image of effortless luxury. She had a way of talking about money, about what she deserved, that made my teeth ache. She was beautiful, in a manufactured, influencer-ready way, with perfectly sculpted brows and a pouty lip, but beneath the polished exterior, I sensed a hollowness, a relentless pursuit of external validation. I'd seen Nicholas bring home similar girls before, girls who were drawn to his charm and easygoing nature, but none had ever progressed to the fiancé stage. I waited, patiently, for him to see what I saw, for the infatuation to wear off. It always did. This time, it didn't. This time, it didn't. This time, it felt different, more serious, more permanent. I tried to stay out of it. My own life was busy, a demanding job that was finally allowing me to save for a down payment on my own condo, a new boyfriend, then, who was stable and kind, and plans for a much-needed vacation to the Pacific Northwest. I wasn't home much, and when I was, I often retreated to my room, seeking refuge from the constant performative affection between Nicholas and Madison. I missed the quiet camaraderie Nicholas and I used to share, the easy banter over dinner, the shared meals where we'd debrief our days. Now, the house felt filled with Madison's presence, her loud phone calls, her endless selfies, her constant chatter about wedding plans that grew more extravagant by the day. I knew a storm was brewing, a tempest of unrealistic expectations and financial recklessness, but I hoped it would pass without involving me directly. I was wrong. It was never going to pass without involving me. Nicholas eventually came to me, looking haggard, his usual youthful exuberance replaced by a desperate plea. Madison, he explained, wanted a wedding. Not just a wedding, but the wedding. A fairy tale, Pinterest-perfect extravaganza, a custom-designed gown with a cathedral train, a lavish outdoor ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley, a top-tier caterer, a live band flown in from Nashville, and a 2-week honeymoon in Bora Bora. "It's once in a lifetime, live," he pleaded, echoing Madison's exact words, his voice a desperate echo of her desires. He wasn't against it, not really. He was just overwhelmed by the price tag. Their calculations, Madison's calculations, put the total somewhere around $75,000, with another $15,000 for the honeymoon. A staggering sum for 2 kids barely out of their teens, neither of whom had a stable career or significant savings. Madison's parents, who lived on a small, struggling farm in rural Indiana, were lovely people, salt of the earth, but they certainly didn't have that kind of money. Neither did we. Nicholas had tried every bank in town, every credit union, every online lender he could find. But with no significant credit history, a string of temporary jobs, and a modest, inconsistent income, he was repeatedly denied. "They just don't see my potential, Live," he'd complained, frustrated. Madison, however, was relentless. She stomped her foot, she cried, she threatened to call off the engagement, accusing him of not loving her enough to give her the wedding she deserved. She demanded her dream wedding, and Nicholas, desperate to please her, was at his wit's end. That's when Nicholas came to me, his eyes wide with a desperate hope I hadn't seen since he was a child asking for a new toy. "Liv, you have good credit. You're stable. They'll give you the loan." He promised they'd make all the payments, that it was just a formality, a way to get the money they needed. He swore on everything he held dear that he would never let me down. I looked at him, at his pleading eyes, and then I thought of Madison, of her insatiable desires, of the precariousness of their young relationship. I thought of the years I'd spent clawing my way to financial stability, the sacrifices I'd made, the dreams I'd deferred. And with a heavy heart, knowing the storm it would unleash, I said no. I tried to explain, calmly, rationally. "Nicholas, spending $75,000 on one day is insane. It's a ridiculous amount of money. And what if you two don't make it? You're both jumping from job to job. Who's going to pay for it then? Me?" I told him I didn't believe their marriage would last. Not with Madison's demands and his impulsiveness. I reminded him of our parents' struggles, of the burden I'd carried. But the loan, I emphasized, would be my responsibility, regardless of their marital bliss or lack thereof. My credit, my future would be on the line. He exploded. "You're always trying to ruin everything. You just make things up to be negative. You're jealous." Then came the low blow, the one that always stung. The one that revealed the depth of his immaturity and resentment. "You're just jealous, aren't you? Because I'm younger, and I'm actually building a family, and you're still alone." The accusation hung in the air, absurd and childish, yet it landed with a surprising sting. Jealous? Of this impending financial disaster and emotional roller coaster? Of a relationship built on manipulation and unrealistic expectations? I almost laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. There was nothing to be jealous of, only pity and a profound sense of disappointment. He stormed out, Madison trailing behind him, a triumphant smirk on her face, as if she'd won some invisible battle. He declared he didn't want me at his wedding, that I was no longer his sister. They packed their bags that very day, a dramatic exit designed to punish me, to make me regret my decision. They thought they were teaching me a lesson, but as the door slammed shut and the silence descended, a profound sense of relief washed over me. For the first time in years, the house was truly mine again. I could finally breathe. I could finally rest. The burden for a brief moment felt lifted. Nicholas is still angry, I know. But I'm certain that one day, he'll remember my words. He'll understand why I did what I did. Until then, I can only hope they don't find a way to get that loan, that he doesn't drown in debt for a dream wedding that was never truly his. Because I know with a chilling certainty exactly who he'll come running to when it all falls apart. And I wonder, with a pang of dread, if I'll have the strength to turn him away again, or if the unbreakable bond of family will once again pull me into his chaos. The silence that followed Nicholas and Madison's dramatic exit was, at first, a balm. The house, once filled with Madison's incessant chatter and Nicholas's defensive retorts, now breathed with a quiet I hadn't realized I missed so desperately. I reclaimed the living room, the kitchen, even the backyard, which had become Madison's impromptu selfie studio. I cooked what I wanted, watched what I wanted, and for a few blissful weeks, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. It was a strange kind of freedom, tinged with the familiar ache of loneliness that always accompanied Nicholas's absence, but freedom nonetheless. I found myself lingering in the quiet, savoring the absence of conflict, the lack of Madison's demanding presence. I rediscovered old hobbies, spent evenings reading without interruption, and even started painting again, something I hadn't done since before our parents died. The canvas became a sanctuary, a place where I could process the tangled emotions of grief, resentment, and a burgeoning sense of peace. But the relief was fleeting. Guilt, that insidious companion, began to creep in. He was my brother, after all. The boy I'd raised, the one I'd sacrificed my own youth for. Had I been too harsh? Too unyielding? Maybe a small loan, just enough to get them started, wouldn't have been the end of the world. I tried calling him a few times, leaving carefully worded, voiceless messages that balanced concern with a hint of apology. No response. Texts went unanswered. He'd blocked me on social media, a childish but effective way to cut off communication. It was as if I'd ceased to exist in his world, a world I had once been the undisputed center of. The silence from his end was deafening, a constant reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. I worried about him, about his impulsiveness, about Madison's influence. I imagined them struggling, making bad decisions, and a part of me, the older sister part, yearned to swoop in and fix it, even though I knew, logically, that I couldn't and shouldn't. Life, however, had a way of moving forward, whether Nicholas was in it or not. My graphic design career was finally taking off. I landed a major client, a boutique marketing agency that specialized in sustainable fashion brands, and the work was creatively fulfilling and financially rewarding. I moved into a sleek, modern apartment in downtown Chicago, a far cry from the suburban house that held so many bittersweet memories. The city's energy was intoxicating, a constant hum of possibility that drowned out the lingering echoes of my past. The skyline, a glittering testament to ambition and progress, seemed to mirror my own upward trajectory. I even started dating again, a charming architect named Ben, who understood my need for independence and my occasional bouts of quiet introspection. He was kind, stable, and everything Nicholas wasn't, a grounding force in my often turbulent emotional landscape. With Ben, I felt seen, appreciated, and loved for who I was, not for what I could provide. One evening, while scrolling through my old high school friend Sarah's Instagram, a picture stopped me cold. It was a group shot from a local bar, and there in the background was Nicholas and Madison. But what truly caught my eye was the subtle sparkle on Madison's left hand. A ring. Not the diamond monstrosity she demanded, but a simple, elegant band. They were married. My stomach dropped. They'd done it. Without me. Without the lavish wedding. Without the loan. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Anger at being excluded, relief that he hadn't gone into debt for a spectacle, and a profound sadness that our rift had deepened to this extent. It was a punch to the gut, a confirmation that I was truly out of his life, at least for now. The thought that he could get married, start a new chapter, without even a word to me. His older sister, who had sacrificed so much, was a bitter pill to swallow. I called Sarah immediately, my voice tight with a mixture of shock and curiosity. "Hey, saw your post. Nicholas and Madison, are they married?" Sarah hesitated, a telltale pause that spoke volumes. "Oh, yeah. Didn't you know? They eloped a few months ago. Super quiet, just them and a justice of the peace. Madison said they decided to save the money for a down payment on a house. Her voice was laced with a hint of skepticism, a tone I knew well. Sarah had always been a good judge of character, and she'd never been Madison's biggest fan. She's been posting about it nonstop, actually. All these pictures of their cozy little starter home in the suburbs. Said Nicholas got a great new job in real estate. Seems like they're doing well. A down payment? I repeated, the words tasting like ash. That's surprising. The Madison I knew wouldn't save for a down payment if she could spend it on something shiny and immediate. The whole narrative felt off. Tell me about it, Sarah chuckled dryly. Madison's been posting about their cozy little starter home in the suburbs. Said Nicholas got a great new job in real estate. Seems like they're doing well. Doing well. The phrase echoed in my mind long after I hung up. So they had found a way. Nicholas, the one who couldn't hold down a job, was now a successful real estate agent, and Madison, the queen of extravagance, was suddenly frugal. It didn't add up. The relief I'd felt earlier morphed into a gnawing suspicion. What had really happened? Had my refusal pushed him to make a more sensible decision, or was there something else at play? The thought that they might have deliberately kept me in the dark, not just about the wedding, but about their supposed financial turnaround, stemmed more than the initial exclusion. It felt like a deliberate act of defiance, a way to prove me wrong, to show me they didn't need me. And yet the pieces didn't fit. Madison's sudden pragmatism was completely out of character. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a deeper story, a more complicated truth, lurking beneath the surface of their carefully curated social media post. Weeks turned into months. My life with Ben blossomed. We talked about moving in together, about our future, about the possibility of starting a family of our own someday. He was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner, and for the first time I felt truly happy, truly settled. But the shadow of Nicholas, though distant, never fully disappeared. Every now and then, Sarah would drop a casual update. Saw Madison at the mall. She was carrying a designer baby bag. Guess they're expecting. Or Nicholas looked stressed. Said his real estate job was more commission-based than he thought. The snippets were contradictory, unsettling. Madison's social media continued to paint a picture of domestic bliss and financial ease, but Sarah's observations hinted at a different reality. The baby news in particular sent a jolt through me. A baby. Nicholas was going to be a father. The thought filled me with a strange mix of joy for him and profound worry for the child who would be born into such a volatile situation. I found myself checking Madison's social media more frequently, searching for clues, for any sign that my brother was truly happy, truly stable. But the more I looked, the more the cracks in their perfect facade began to show. The designer baby bags and lavish nursery decor seemed to clash with Sarah's reports of Nicholas's stress and the commission-based nature of his job. It was a house of cards, and I could feel the wind beginning to pick up. One rainy Tuesday evening, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, my finger hovering over the ignore button, but something compelled me to answer. A premonition, perhaps, or just a lingering anxiety that always accompanied the thought of Nicholas. Hello? Liv, it's Nicholas. His voice was thin, strained, barely recognizable. The usual bravado was gone, replaced by a desperate tremor that sent a chill down my spine. I need your help. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The call I'd both dreaded and anticipated. The call I knew, deep down, was inevitable. Nicholas? What's wrong? Are you okay? I tried to keep my voice calm, but a knot of fear tightened in my stomach. No, I'm not okay. We're not okay. Madison, she's pregnant, and we're about to lose everything. The words tumbled out, rushed and frantic, painting a grim picture of their unraveling lives. He poured out this story, A torrent of panicked words that confirmed my worst fears. The down payment for the house had been a lie, a desperate attempt to save face after I'd refused the loan. They'd taken out a high-interest personal loan from a shady online lender, one that promised quick cash with minimal paperwork, but came with exorbitant rates and predatory terms. The kind of loan that preys on the desperate, trapping them in a cycle of ever-increasing debt. Nicholas's great new job in real estate was a bust. He'd barely closed a deal, and the commission checks were non-existent, leaving them with no steady income. Madison, meanwhile, had quit her salon job, claiming pregnancy fatigue, and was spending what little money they had on designer baby clothes and lavish nursery decor, convinced that everything would magically work out once the baby arrived, as if a child would somehow conjure financial stability out of thin air. They were months behind on rent for their small, overpriced apartment. The loan payments were crushing them, a relentless tide of interest and fees that swallowed every penny they earned. They maxed out credit cards, borrowed from friends and family, who were now demanding repayment and were now facing eviction. Madison was due in a month, and they had nowhere to go. "I don't know what to do, Liv," he choked out, his voice cracking, raw with despair. I messed up so bad. Madison. She's threatening to leave me if I can't fix this. She says it's all my fault for not getting a real job, for not providing for her and the baby. The blame, as always, was shifted, never truly resting on his own shoulders or Madison's. I listened, a cold fury building inside me. Not at Nicholas, not entirely, but at Madison, and at the sheer, unadulterated recklessness of it all. This was exactly what I had warned him about. This was why I had said no. But seeing him so broken, so utterly defeated, stirred the old protective instincts I thought I'd buried. He was still my little brother, lost and floundering, and despite everything, I couldn't turn my back on him. The image of him, alone and desperate, was too much to bear. The years of raising him, of being his guardian, his protector, resurfaced with a powerful force. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm, a practiced calm that masked the turmoil within. "I'll come to you." I drove to their apartment, a cramped, cookie-cutter unit in a sprawling suburban complex that felt miles away from my chic downtown loft. The building itself seemed to sag with a weary resignation, its beige facade blending into the gray, rainy sky. The air inside their apartment was thick with tension and the faint smell of stale takeout and desperation. Madison, heavily pregnant, sat on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, her face a mask of sullen resentment. She barely acknowledged me, her eyes glued to the screen, as if the virtual world offered more comfort than the crumbling reality around her. Nicholas, pale and gaunt, looked like a ghost of his former self, his usually vibrant eyes dulled by stress and sleepless nights. The apartment was filled with unopened baby gifts, a stark contrast to the eviction notice taped to the refrigerator, a cruel juxtaposition of hope and despair. "So, you're finally here to help, Olivia?" Madison said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, not even looking up from her phone. "Took you long enough. If you just helped us out in the first place, none of this would be happening." Her words were a calculated jab, designed to inflict maximum guilt. I stared at her, incredulous. "You think this is my fault?" The audacity of her statement took my breath away. "Well, if you hadn't been so selfish, Nicholas wouldn't have had to go to those shady lenders," she retorted, finally meeting my gaze, her eyes narrowed, cold and accusing. "He was just trying to give me the wedding I deserved. A proper wedding. You, with your perfect life, you just had to make it difficult." Her narrative was a twisted version of reality, one where I was the villain and she, the innocent victim. Nicholas flinched, but said nothing. He just sat there, head bowed, defeated, a puppet on Madison's strings. It was clear Madison had completely twisted the narrative, painting me as the villain, and Nicholas, in his desperation, had bought into it, or at least was too exhausted to fight back. "Madison," I said, my voice low and steady, a deliberate effort to maintain control. I refused to co-sign a loan for a wedding that was financially irresponsible. I warned Nicholas about this. And now you're facing eviction, you're pregnant, and you're blaming me? I gestured around the squalid apartment, the unopened baby gifts, the eviction notice. This is the consequence of your choices, both of you. It's not just the eviction, Nicholas interjected, finally refining his voice, though it was weak and shaky. The loan, it's gotten worse. They're threatening to garnish my wages, even though I barely have any. And Madison, she's been having complications. The stress, it's not good for the baby. His eyes pleaded with me, a silent appeal for understanding, for help. I spent the next few hours going through their finances, a horrifying journey into a black hole of debt. The online loan had ballooned to an astronomical sum, far beyond their ability to repay, with interest rates that bordered on criminal. Credit cards were maxed out. There were overdue utility bills, car payments, and medical bills from Madison's prenatal care that were piling up unpaid. They were drowning, and they were dragging a new, innocent life down with them. Every number I crunched, every bill I reviewed, confirmed my initial assessment. This was a financial catastrophe of epic proportions, one that would take years, if not decades, to recover from. I offered a temporary solution. I would pay their overdue rent to prevent eviction, and I would help them find a more affordable place to live, a small, subsidized apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. But I made it clear, this was not a bailout. This was a bridge. They needed to get their act together, and Nicholas needed to find a stable job immediately. Madison scoffed, rolling her eyes, but Nicholas, his eyes filled with a glimmer of hope, nodded vigorously. Thank you, Liv. Thank you. I'll do whatever it takes. His gratitude was palpable, a stark contrast to Madison's dismissive attitude. Over the next few weeks, I helped Nicholas craft a resume, coached him for interviews, and even pulled some strings with contacts in my network. He landed a job as a junior account manager at a small marketing firm, a stable position with a decent salary and benefits. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start, a lifeline thrown into the turbulent waters of their financial despair. Madison, however, remained a problem. She complained constantly about their new, smaller apartment, about Nicholas's long hours, about the lack of money for her essentials. She seemed incapable of understanding the gravity of their situation, still clinging to the fantasy of a lavish lifestyle, as if reality was merely an inconvenience to be ignored. Her social media posts, though less frequent, still depicted a life of luxury, carefully edited to hide the truth of their struggles. She complained to Nicholas about how I was controlling their lives, how I was making them suffer, further driving a wedge between us. One afternoon, Nicholas called me, his voice tight with suppressed anger, a raw edge I hadn't heard in years. Liv, I need you to come over. Madison, she just told me something. Something huge. I don't know what to do. His voice was laced with a fresh wave of despair, a new kind of brokenness. I arrived to find Nicholas pacing the living room of their tiny new apartment, his face a thundercloud, his hands clenched into fists. Madison sat on the sofa, defiantly scrolling through her phone, a smirk playing on her lips, a chillingly familiar expression of self-satisfaction. What's going on? I asked, a sense of dread washing over me, a cold premonition of another, deeper betrayal. Nicholas stopped, his eyes burning into Madison, a fire I hadn't seen in them since his rebellious teenage years. Tell her, Madison. Tell her your big secret. His voice was low, dangerous. Madison finally looked up, her smirk widening, her eyes glinting with a perverse pleasure. Oh, you mean the baby? Well, it's not Nicholas's. I arrived to find Nicholas pacing the living room of their tiny new apartment, his face a thundercloud, his hands clenched into fist. Madison sat on the sofa, defiantly scrolling through her phone, a smirk playing on her lips, a chillingly familiar expression of self-satisfaction. "What's going on?" I asked, a sense of dread washing over me, a cold premonition of another, deeper betrayal. Nicholas stopped, his eyes burning into Madison, a fire I hadn't seen in them since his rebellious teenage years. "Tell her, Madison. Tell her your big secret." His voice was low, dangerous. Madison finally looked up, her smirk widening, her eyes glinting with a perverse pleasure. "Oh, you mean the baby?" "Well, it's not Nicholas's." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. A bombshell dropped into the already fragile piece of the room. My breath caught my throat, my mind struggling to process the implications. Nicholas let out a guttural cry, a sound of pure anguish, a primal scream of betrayal. I stared at Madison, trying to comprehend the depth of her callousness. What? What are you talking about?" My voice was barely a whisper, laced with disbelief. "Exactly what I said," Madison replied, her voice chillingly calm, devoid of any remorse. "This baby isn't his. It's someone else's. A fling I had before we got married. Nicholas was so desperate to get married, so desperate to please me, I figured why not? A baby would just seal the deal, right? Make him even more committed. And you, Olivia, you'd be so guilt-tripped, you'd have to help us out financially. It was a perfect plan." She laughed, a cold, brittle sound that sent shivers down my spine, a sound that spoke of pure, unadulterated malice. The sheer audacity, the calculated cruelty of her confession was breathtaking. She had used Nicholas's love, his vulnerability, his desire for a family, as a weapon against him, against us. Nicholas collapsed onto the sofa, his face buried in his hands, his body shaking with silent sobs. The betrayal was monumental, a cruel, calculated act that shattered everything. I felt a surge of protectiveness for my brother, a raw, primal anger at Madison for her callous manipulation. She had used him, used his love, his desperation to secure her own comfort, and then, when her plan began to unravel, she'd thrown him under the bus with a casual cruelty that was breathtaking. The years of sacrifice, of trying to protect him, felt like they had been for nothing. He was utterly broken, and it was all her doing. You planned this?" I whispered, my voice trembling with a barely contained rage. "You deliberately trapped him? Used a baby, an innocent life, as a tool for your own selfish gain? Well, he was easy to trap, wasn't he?" She sneered, fondly putting her phone down, her eyes gleaming with a predatory satisfaction. Always so eager to please, so desperate for a family. And you, the big sister, always swooping in to save the day. I figured I had you both wrapped around my finger. I just needed a way to secure my future, and Nicholas, with his big dreams and empty pockets, was the perfect mark. And the wedding? The loan? Was that all part of the plan, too? I pressed, needing to understand the full extent of her deception. "Of course," she said, shrugging as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "I wanted a big wedding. When Nicholas couldn't deliver, I figured I'd make him feel guilty enough to get it from you. When that didn't work, the baby was the next logical step. It's not my fault he's so gullible. He should have known better than to trust someone like me." Her words were a final, brutal stab, designed to strip Nicholas of any remaining dignity. Nicholas lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with a pain so profound it made my chest ache. But beneath the pain, a new emotion was stirring, a cold, hard anger. "Get out," he rasped, his voice barely audible, but filled with a chilling finality. "Get out of my apartment. Get out of my life. I never want to see you again." Madison laughed again, a harsh, dismissive sound that grated on my nerves. Oh, Nicholas, don't be dramatic. Where would I go? I'm pregnant with with a baby, and you're still responsible for me legally until the baby is born. You think you can just kick me out? She was still trying to exert control, still trying to manipulate him with the legalities, with the perceived helplessness of her situation. That's when I stepped in, my voice cutting through her smugness like a knife. No, Nicholas, she's right. You can't just kick her out. But you can protect yourself, and you can protect that baby regardless of who the father is. I turned to Madison, my voice steel, my eyes blazing with a fury I rarely allowed myself to show. You're not going to manipulate him anymore. You're not going to use this baby as a weapon. We're going to get you the support you need, legally and financially, but you will not be living here, and you will not be extorting my brother. We will ensure that you receive what you are legally entitled to and nothing more. Your game is over, Madison. It was a turning point. Nicholas, though devastated, seemed to find a flicker of strength in my resolve, a lifeline in the storm of his shattered reality. Madison, for the first time, looked genuinely surprised, perhaps even a little scared. Her carefully constructed house of cards was crumbling around her, and she had no more tricks up her sleeve. The power had shifted, and she knew it. It's strange how these dark family secrets connect us, how the threads of deception and love intertwine to create a tapestry of pain and resilience. If this story is getting under your skin, if you're feeling the weight of these hidden truths, subscribe for more real family exposés. You won't believe what happens next. The depths of human deceit and the unexpected strength that can emerge from its ashes are truly astounding. Join us as we continue to unravel the tangled web of family secrets, one shocking revelation at a time. The air in the cramped apartment crackled with a tension so thick it felt suffocating. Nicholas, still hunched on the sofa, looked like a man who had just had his world ripped apart. Madison, however, had regained her composure, a defiant glint in her eyes. My words, though firm, seemed to have only momentarily startled her. She crossed her arms over her swollen belly, a smirk returning to her lips, a chillingly familiar expression of self-satisfaction. Oh, really, Olivia? Madison sneered, her voice laced with venom, loud enough to carry through the thin walls. And just how do you propose to do that? I'm pregnant, alone, and soon to be homeless, thanks to your brother's incompetence. Society will be very interested in that story. A poor, abandoned mother-to-be cast aside by her heartless fiancé and his cold, calculating sister. She punctuated her statement with a theatrical sigh, clearly relishing the drama, already rehearsing her victim narrative for an imagined audience. Society will also be interested in a woman who deliberately entrapped a young man, lied about paternity, and attempted to extort him and his family. I countered, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, my gaze unwavering. We have your confession, Madison. Right here, right now. And I assure you, my brother is not as incompetent as you think. He's just been blinded by you. But that blindness is lifting, and the truth, Madison, has a way of coming out. Nicholas slowly lifted his head. His eyes, though still raw with pain, now held a flicker of something new, a dawning comprehension, a spark of anger that had been buried under layers of hurt and self-blame. He looked at Madison, truly looked at her, stripping away the layers of infatuation and delusion. The girl he'd been so desperate to marry, the mother of his supposed child, was no longer the idealized figure he'd created. She was a stranger, a calculating manipulator, and the realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. You really did all this? Nicholas whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible, as if the words themselves were too heavy to utter. The wedding, the loan, the baby, it was all a lie? Everything we had, everything I thought we were building? Madison shrugged, a dismissive gesture that spoke volumes. A chilling lack of remorse. A means to an end, Nicholas. You weren't exactly providing the life I wanted, were you? I had to take matters into my own hands. I needed security, a future. You were just a stepping stone. Her words were delivered with a casual cruelty that made my blood run cold. The life you wanted? I interjected, stepping closer to Madison, my patience wearing thin, a protective fury rising within me. What about the life he wanted? What about the life this baby deserves? You're playing with people's emotions, Madison, with their futures, all for a lavish lifestyle you haven't earned. You're destroying lives for a fantasy. And you have Olivia. She shot back, her eyes narrowing, a venomous glint in their depths. You think you're so high and mighty with your fancy apartment and your perfect boyfriend. You think you're better than me? You abandoned your brother when he needed you most, just because you didn't approve of his choices. You're just as selfish as you accuse me of being. You're a hypocrite, Olivia, a self-righteous busybody who can't stand to see anyone else happy. Her words, though designed to wound, barely registered. My focus was entirely on Nicholas. He was watching us, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions, shock, anger, profound sadness, and a growing resolve. This was his moment, his choice. Would he continue to be Madison's victim, or would he finally stand up for himself, reclaim his dignity, and break free from her toxic grip? The decision, I knew, had to be his and his alone. No, Nicholas said, his voice gaining strength, a new steel in its tone, his eyes fixed on Madison, unwavering. No, she's not selfish. She was trying to protect me. From you. From myself. She saw what I couldn't, what I refused to see. He pushed himself up from the sofa, his posture straightening, a subtle but significant shift in his entire demeanor. The boy I'd known, the one who'd been so easily swayed, was gone. In his place stood a man, bruised but not broken, finally seeing the truth. You know what, Madison? You're right. I was easy to trap. I was desperate. I was stupid. But I'm not anymore. And this baby deserves better than to be a pawn in your twisted games. This baby deserves a chance at a real life, with real love not built on lies and manipulation. Madison's smirk faltered. She hadn't expected this. She'd expected him to crumble, to beg, to be manipulated back into her control. But something had fundamentally shifted within him. The boy I'd raised, the one who'd always been a little too eager to please, a little too susceptible to external validation, was finally finding his backbone, his voice, his own sense of self-worth. It was a transformation I had longed to see, but never truly believed would happen. So what, you're just going to abandon me? She scoffed, trying to regain control, her voice rising in pitch, a hint of desperation creeping in. Leave a pregnant woman out on the street? Is that what a good sister does, Olivia? Is that what a good man does, Nicholas? No, I said, stepping forward, placing a hand on Nicholas's shoulder, a silent gesture of support and solidarity. We're not abandoning you. We're offering you a choice. You can accept our help, get the support you need for yourself and the baby, and move forward responsibly. We will ensure you have a safe place to live, access to prenatal care, and legal counsel. Or you can continue down this path of deception and blame, and we will ensure that the truth of your actions, your deliberate manipulation, is known. The choice is yours, Madison, but understand this. Nicholas is no longer your puppet, and I am no longer your unwitting enabler. Nicholas nodded, his gaze unwavering, his jaw set. She's right. We'll help you, but not on your terms. Not with your lives, not with your games. The confrontation escalated, moving from the cramped apartment to a public space, as I had envisioned in the outline. I knew Madison thrived on public spectacle, on playing the victim, on drawing sympathy from strangers. So I suggested we meet at a neutral location, a bustling coffee shop in a trendy part of Chicago, hoping the public setting would force some semblance of civility, a modicum of decorum. It did not. Instead, it became the stage for her final, desperate performance. We sat at a small, round table near the window. The clatter of coffee cups, the hiss of the espresso machine, and the murmur of conversations providing a surreal, almost cinematic backdrop to our intensely personal drama. Nicholas, still pale but resolute, sat beside me, his hand occasionally brushing mine, a silent acknowledgement of our renewed alliance. Madison, dressed impeccably despite her advanced pregnancy, sat opposite, radiating an icy defiance. Her eyes darted around the room, as if seeking an audience, a sympathetic ear, a potential ally in her theatrical display. She adjusted her designer scarf, smoothed her perfectly coiffed hair, and took a slow, deliberate sip of her latte, as if preparing for a performance. "So, what's this grand plan, Olivia?" Madison began, her voice a theatrical whisper, loud enough for nearby patrons to overhear, designed to pique their curiosity. "Are you finally going to admit you were wrong? That you ruined your brother's life? That you're tearing apart a family all because of your petty jealousy and control issues?" She leaned forward, her eyes wide and innocent, a picture of wronged innocence. "Madison, we're here to discuss a path forward for you and the baby," I stated calmly, ignoring her bait, refusing to be drawn into her drama. "Nicholas is willing to provide support, but under certain conditions. First, a paternity test to establish legal parentage and ensure the child's rights are protected. Second, you will move into a safe, affordable living situation that we will help you secure, one that is conducive to raising a child. Third, you will cease all attempts to manipulate Nicholas or use this situation for financial gain beyond what is legally and ethically appropriate. This is about the baby's future, Madison, not your lifestyle." Madison let out a dramatic gasp, drawing the attention of a couple at the next table who paused their conversation to listen. "A paternity test? After everything we've been through? How dare you? This is an insult. Nicholas, are you going to let your sister accuse me of such a thing? Are you going to let her question your love, your commitment to our child?" She turned to him, her eyes wide and brimming with manufactured tears, a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Nicholas, however, didn't flinch. He met her gaze, his own eyes hard, devoid of the adoration that had once blinded him. "It's not an accusation, Madison. It's a necessity. You admitted the baby isn't mine. We need to confirm that for everyone's sake. Especially the baby's. This child deserves to know its true father and its true family. And I deserve to know the truth after all your lies." Her face contorted, the mask of victimhood slipping, revealing the raw anger beneath. You can't do this to me. I'm carrying your child. You promised me a life, a future. You promised me everything." "No, Madison," I said, my voice cutting through her theatrics sharp and clear. "You're carrying a child, and we wanted to ensure that child has the best possible start, free from your lies and manipulation. If the father is someone else, they deserve to know, and you deserve to be held accountable for your actions. This isn't about promises you extracted under false pretenses. It's about reality and responsibility." This was the game-changing revelation, the moment where Madison's carefully constructed narrative completely unraveled. She had banked on Nicholas's guilt, on my sense of family obligation, on the societal sympathy for a pregnant woman. But we were calling her bluff, exposing her deception in a public forum, however subtly. The whispers from the surrounding tables grew louder, curious glances turning into outright stares. Her audience was no longer sympathetic. They were judging. Madison's eyes flashed with a mixture of fear and pure, unadulterated rage. She slammed her hand on the table, rattling the coffee cups, a desperate attempt to regain control. "You think you're so clever, don't you, Olivia? Always the hero, always the martyr. But you don't know anything about what I've been through. You don't know what it's like to fight for everything, to be dismissed and overlooked, To be told you're not good enough, not pretty enough, not rich enough. I just wanted a better life, a life I deserved. Her voice cracked, a raw, unedited glimpse into her own pain, a pain that, for a fleeting moment, almost made me feel a flicker of pity. And that justifies the lying and manipulating the people who care about you? Nicholas finally exploded, his voice rising, drawing more curious glances, silencing the entire coffee shop. His pain, his betrayal was raw and exposed. That justifies destroying my life, my trust, my hope for a family? I loved you, Madison. I was willing to do anything for you. I put my entire future on the line for you. And you just used me. You used my love, my loyalty, my desperation, and you threw it all away for a lie. His raw, unfiltered pain hung in the air, silencing the usual coffee shop chatter for a beat. Madison recoiled, genuinely stunned by his outburst. This wasn't the meek, easily swayed Nicholas she was used to. This was a man who had been pushed to his breaking point and was finally pushing back, unleashing years of suppressed anger and hurt. The air crackled with the intensity of his emotion, a palpable force that seemed to vibrate through the room. I didn't mean to hurt you, Nicholas, she stammered, her voice losing its theatrical edge, replaced by a genuine tremor, a hint of fear. I just wanted a better life. I wanted to be secure. I thought this was the only way. I didn't know how else to get what I needed. There are always other ways, Madison, I said, my voice softer now, seeing a crack in her armor, a glimpse of the frightened girl beneath the hardened facade. Honesty, hard work, building something real with someone who genuinely loves you, not someone you can exploit. A life built on truth, not on lies. Nicholas, his chest heaving, looked at me, then back at Madison. The transformation was complete. The naive, impulsive boy was gone, replaced by a man who had faced a harsh truth and was ready to deal with its consequences. He was still hurting, deeply, the wounds of betrayal fresh and raw, but he was no longer broken. He was angry, yes, but also clear-eyed, resolute. He had seen the depths of Madison's deception, and in doing so, he had found his own strength, his own voice, his own path forward. I'm done, Madison, Nicholas said, his voice firm, final, echoing through the stunned silence of the coffee shop. I'm done with the lies, the manipulation, the games. We'll get the paternity test. We'll figure out the legalities. But you and I, we're over. For good. There's nothing left between us. Madison stared at him, her eyes wide, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. It was unclear if it was a tear of genuine remorse, of shattered dreams, or simply the frustration of a plan gone awry, of losing her grip on the control she so desperately craved. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair over with a clatter that echoed in the suddenly silent coffee shop. Without another word, she stormed out, pushing past startled patrons, leaving us sitting there, the weight of her departure hanging heavy in the air. A lingering scent of expensive perfume and bitter defeat. Nicholas leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, a long, shuddering exhale escaping his lips. He looked utterly exhausted, as if he'd just run a marathon, but also, strangely, lighter. The burden he'd carried for so long, the weight of Madison's expectations and his own self-deception, seemed to have finally lifted. I can't believe I was so blind, he murmured, more to himself than to me, his voice filled with a profound sense of regret. She had me completely fooled. I let her fool me. She's good at it, Nicholas, I said gently, reaching across the table to cover his hand with mine. But you saw through it. That's what matters. You found your way back to yourself. He looked at me, a genuine, heartfelt look I hadn't seen in years, a look filled with gratitude and a renewed sense of connection. Thank you, Liv. For everything. For not giving up on me, even when I was being an idiot. For being the sister I needed, even when I didn't know how to ask. I squeezed his shoulder. You're my brother, Nicholas. Always. And we'll get through this. Together. This moment shattered everything I knew, everything I thought I understood about family, loyalty, and the lengths people would go to for what they believed they deserved. It was a brutal awakening, a stark reminder that even those closest to us can harbor hidden agendas, and that the truth, however painful, is always preferable to a comforting lie. The aftermath of the coffee shop confrontation was a whirlwind of legalities and emotional fallout. Madison, true to her nature, didn't go quietly. She hired a lawyer, a sharp-suited woman who specialized in family law, and attempted to paint herself as the wronged party, a vulnerable pregnant woman abandoned by her callous fiancé and his manipulative sister. But the truth, once exposed, was a stubborn thing. My detailed notes, Nicholas's testimony, and Madison's own recorded missions painted a very different picture. The legal battle was protracted and emotionally draining, a stark reminder of the depths of Madison's desperation and deceit. The paternity test confirmed what Madison had already confessed. The baby was not Nicholas's. This revelation, while painful, was also a profound liberation for him. It severed the last emotional tie Madison had tried to exploit, freeing him from a future built on a lie. The legal proceedings were drawn out and messy, but eventually a settlement was reached. Madison received a modest sum for her immediate needs and prenatal care, with the understanding that she would pursue child support from the biological father once he was identified. Nicholas was absolved of any parental responsibility, though he insisted on setting up a small trust for the child, a gesture of goodwill and a testament to his newfound maturity. Nicholas, meanwhile, embarked on a painful but necessary journey of self-discovery. The marketing job, while stable, wasn't his passion. He realized he'd been chasing Madison's dreams, not his own, constantly seeking external validation rather than internal fulfillment. He started taking night classes at a local community college, exploring different fields, slowly piecing together what he truly wanted from life. He dabbled in photography, then woodworking, finally finding his calling in carpentry, a trade that allowed him to work with his hands and see the tangible results of his efforts. Our relationship, too, began to heal, slowly, deliberately, like a fractured bone knitting itself back together. The walls he'd built between us crumbled, replaced by a fragile but genuine connection. We really talked, for hours on end, dissecting the past, acknowledging our mistakes, and forging a new path forward. He apologized profusely for his past behavior, for the hurtful words, for his blindness. He confessed the shame he'd felt, the embarrassment of his financial ruin, and the crushing weight of Madison's manipulation. Madison gave birth to a healthy baby girl, whom she named Luna. Nicholas and I, though no longer directly involved, kept a distant eye on our progress through mutual acquaintances. The biological father eventually stepped forward, a man Madison had briefly dated before Nicholas. He was shocked, but ultimately he accepted his responsibility, albeit with a healthy dose of legal counsel to protect his own interest. Nicholas, now 26, is a different man. He's still impulsive, still prone to grand ideas, but now he tempers them with a healthy dose of realism and a newfound sense of accountability. He's found his calling in carpentry, a trade that allows him to work with his hands and see the tangible results of his efforts, a stark contrast to the ephemeral promises of real estate. He's saving up for a down payment on a small house, a modest one, built on his own terms, with his own sweat and equity. I still lie awake sometimes, staring at the ceiling of my Chicago apartment, wondering, what would have happened if I'd given him the loan? Would he have learned these hard lessons? Would he have found his own path, his own strength? There are no easy answers, no clear-cut rights or wrongs in the messy tapestry of family. But I know this, sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that lead to the greatest growth. Sometimes, saying no is the most loving thing you can do, even when it feels like tearing your own heart out. Our bond, once fractured, is now stronger, forged in the fires of adversity. We are no longer just siblings. We are survivors, bound by shared history and a deeper understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses. The scars remain, a testament to the battles we've fought, to the pain we've endured, but they are no longer open wounds. They are reminders of how far we've come and how much we've learned. They are badges of resilience, symbols of a love that, despite everything, endured. I still lie awake wondering, what would you have done when they tried to control your body, your finances, your future? When the lines between love and manipulation blurred, and the truth became a weapon? Share your truth in the comments. Subscribe for more shocking family revelations, because every family has its secrets, and sometimes exposing them is the only way to truly heal. Your stories, your experiences, your courage to speak out help us all navigate the complex emotional landscapes of our own lives. Join the conversation and let's uncover these hidden truths together, building a community where authenticity triumphs over deceit and where the human spirit, even after being shattered, can find a way to rebuild and thrive. Your voice matters, your story is powerful, and together we can illuminate the darkest corners of family drama. Don't let anyone silence your truth. Share it and let the healing begin.